I'm very happy to talk about agentic systems. I could talk about it for hours, but I only have like 12 minutes, so I better get started. And also thanks to Nicolas, who gave a nice speech yesterday introducing also the implications of this topic, because it revolves a lot around what the agents do to our epistemic cycle and what we do to counter it. So I'm a pharmacist by training, and that's a very causally driven discipline. So I like to start my talks with this idiom. Everybody knows it pretty much. And Michael on Tuesday has introduced beautifully why it's not so trivial in AI, because often we deal with high dimensionalities. So for example, in our business, if we try to determine the impact of nature versus nurture on a disease, for example, we pretty quickly hit this curse of dimensionality. And this is even complicated by the fact that our modern experiments look like this, with a bunch of layers and different kinds of modalities that we measure. And it's quite obvious to look to AI to help us with these things, in the same way that AI has helped me create this illustration that would have been beyond me otherwise. Or if you forced me to do it in the same amount of time that it took me to do this illustration with DALL-E, then my slide would be much less impressive. It is pretty obvious that going beyond the artwork is a lot more challenging than having nice diffusion models. So this is an example from a recent perspective that we wrote on molecular causality, where we see the effects of the epidermal growth factor receptor in a very human, purpose-driven illustration that also tells you how you could potentially intervene with the effects on growth that the EGF pathway has. And then we tried to get GPT-4 and DALL-E 3 to do the same thing. And it has to be noted that GPT-4 knows everything about all of these components better than any human expert. But still, to no one's surprise, this is just a beautiful image without any meaning in it. And while it's pretty obvious why the diffusion models do this, it is not obvious how we then go back from the right side to the left. How do we make them to have the same purpose as humans do? And why do we care? Because productivity matters. Even in science, we need to spend our time with many things that are not doing exactly what we want to do. So it's using the high-level reasoning skills about modeling, engineering, your domain knowledge, whether it's biology, matter, energy, or the likes. But science also has a different side, which is more menial and tedious. You need to figure out where to get data and what quality it has. You need to then interpret the long list of results that you get. And depending on who you ask, this may be the majority of the time that you spend doing research. So now we're getting to agent systems. What are these? We had a table at the World Cafe trying to determine whether we need a working group at Helmholtz about agentic systems. We were not able to even attempt answering the question because all we did was talk about definitions. We didn't converge. So that is very common, I feel. But for this talk, I will go with a quite pragmatic definition. I see them as autonomous systems, nowadays leveraging large language models to plan, reason, and execute tasks without the need for continuous human intervention. So there can be some intervention, but it is not at every step. It needs to be sparse. And looking at the technologies that we have to implement these systems, we have quite the amount of tools available to us right now. And I see a clear inverse correlation between the interpretability of what the agents do and what we force them to do or able to force them to do, and the scalability. So if we want agents or agentic systems to answer high-level questions, we need to send them off and compute for a long time. And then it becomes epistemologically impossible for us to look into the reasoning chain and determine whether it makes sense what they do or not. So the central question then is, how do we ensure that the automated scientist follows the epistemic rules that we have decided on as a community? This is what makes science reliable. And I guess this is a question that many people now have. And as much as I like looking at the technology and trying to determine whether there is some advances that we can make in programming that make this more reliable, I ultimately always arrive at the conclusion that this is more about trust. So if you ever were in San Francisco, you might have seen these cars driving around without a driver. And there is a good reason that even though they're in testing for many years now, they only drive in a very small part of the world. Not in other countries, not in Germany, for example. And that is not because BMW is not trying. And you see the same in software, so open source repositories that gain a lot of contributors very quickly. You see it in companies, Cursor, AI-driven programming environment, being the record-breaking first to reach 100 million annual recurring revenue in about a year, something that took OpenAI with its quick adoption more than 6 years to do. And they also do it with a fraction of the people that used to be necessary to do these kinds of things. 25 people work at Cursor in the core team. And obviously this is because they outsource much of the actual work to these agents. But no one at Cursor is able to control what all of these agents do for each of the users in the software that they sell. So I'm obliged to also talk a bit about what we do. I don't have much time, so apologies, and please go to the docs and talk to me if you want to know more. So we try to make these processes more accessible. We develop open frameworks that are supposed to be very modular and reusable, findable for first the knowledge management. So we have a framework that's called BioCypher, Transparent Knowledge Graph Builder. Then when the LLMs came, we connected it to these LLM systems and then to agents. Ultimately, we have projects mainly in biomedicine. This is why this here talks about genes and diseases, because we have one with open targets, but this could be anything. And we also try to extend it towards the extraction. So how do we get solid, robust information out of the very messy information that we have? And we want to work also on ecosystem integration so that we have one nice API for all of it, metadata automation, and also build registries so that people are able to find these components and not have to reinvent them. What we noticed quite early on is that we depend on being very benchmark forward and also to be very innovative with the benchmarks, because it seems with all the degrees of freedom that these systems now have, we need to move beyond the static benchmarking principles that have driven AI so far. And there was a nice work by researchers out of Apple that symbolized the GSM, which is a math reasoning benchmark. And just by parameterizing it and being able to switch around numbers and some parts of sentences without changing the task, they were able to really confuse the LLMs. And we have the same principle in the framework itself. We have a benchmarking framework in BioChatter, and we also apply it to domains. So for example, we have a 2-paper project in gerontology and longevity where we set out requirements for AI systems and what they should be able to do if they should make recommendations for how to live longer. And then we also created a symbolic benchmark based on physician-approved items, anonymized, obviously, but that also then does a combinatorial search of the validity of the agentic recommendations that you give. And what we see is that we need to be programmatic and we need to be open, because otherwise we cannot keep up with the rapid developments that we see in the field. And in agents, this means that we need to find some way to make the reasoning chain transparent. I'm a huge fan of open federated innovation, so we try to follow an orthogonal principle, not build large and complex and often closed infrastructures that probably are entangled with economic concerns, but rather we want to empower the researchers to build their own domain-specific, as Michael put it, white box solutions. We want to provide registry capabilities so that people are easily able to find the tools, the knowledge, the workflows, and even the benchmarks surrounding these tools in the applications. We work in biomedicine, but the software and the approach is quite generic, so I would be very interested to see whether we can extend it to other domains in Helmholtz. And we follow, most importantly, a very open source philosophy. We develop in the open, so it's always a good time to get on board if any of that sounds interesting to you. What we often see in the projects where then PhD candidates, for example, need to reinvent everything from the basic technology to the actual objective that they need to tackle is that many things are quite preliminary and you have very rough, untested code bases and a draft of some paper. And the ideal would be that we have a base layer, and I'm really happy that Helmholtz has also identified this as an objective, that we need to build a pedestal to then approach these grand challenges so that people can then focus on the things that they really want to do the work for, like, for example, improving drug discovery or exploring disease or doing something for diabetes patients. And this includes the technical stuff, so orchestration, benchmarking, documentation, assistance, and I think it also applies to regulation and governance. So everybody that does a project such as this needs to catch up on the state of the art, not just with the technology and follow all the articles and wrap their head around what these new systems can do, but also, if we want to deploy them, what does that mean for my domain? Are there any rules that I need to adhere to? Are there laws? Do I need to talk to lawyers? Please don't. And this is what I feel that Helmholtz, maybe with this interest group or some mechanism, could also help with. So the take-home is agentic AI is pretty much inevitable, but it is not beyond our control, and it should be used for those tasks where we can rely on it first, which is why we need benchmarks to say which tasks are these. We need to safeguard the epistemic cycle, the scientific process, by making everything open, which means the software and also the reasoning chains, if we then deploy such an agentic system. We need a new generation of benchmarks that are dynamic, so that we can formalize our goals that we have in the real world, and then to measure whether these agents adhere to these goals, we also need metrics that tell us how they perform in the real world. So both of these are quite hefty challenges. And none of this is easy, but finally, and most importantly, I think we as a scientific community are the only ones that really can do it if we want to. And with this, I need to thank the members of the community that made this possible in Heidelberg, in Cambridge, in Paris, and now in Munich. The other contributors from around the world, for your attention, and get in touch if anything like that sounds interesting to you. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. Fantastic talk. We have time for one, maybe two short questions from the audience. Everyone's still asleep. But then let me ask, because I believe in all the things that you believe, that benchmarks are actually worth it and that open source is the way to go with these things. But from your experience, how difficult is it to get, let's say, the resources for these things? Because they don't come for free. And it is also tricky to publish these things. So what would be your experience with this?
Yes, I think my experience is kind of survivorship bias, because I am kind of stand out for doing these things, which is in itself a sign for what the scientific community is driven by, which is, the incentive system that everybody is aware of. And I think, and that's why I give the talk here, I think there needs to be a mix of bottom-up and top-down to change it. I think bottom-up we don't have a problem, because most of the PhD candidates you talk to have the same opinions, right? But there's also a system, publishers, very old things, and old things move slow, as the KIT president said. So I guess it is a laborious process, and it's worth doing, so that's why we do it.
Okay,
no easy solutions.
Okay, so it's mostly about belief, at least from the bottom up.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be in science, probably.
Great. And then let me just, one quick question still. You mentioned trust. What would you say is more beneficial, if I had sort of to choose between the two, the benchmarks or the open source to enhance trust in these systems? Very good question. I don't think you can do with either without the other. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I, for one, am quite happy about this, and thank you for the talk.